Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And this week's guest is Corey Hart, not the professional wrestler or singer. Corey Hart is an experienced COO and startup leadership expert. And he's here to talk to us this week about something near and dear to all of us. But that was a woefully inadequate introduction. Corey, could you take over and do a better job for me, please?
Sure. Thanks. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's really good to see you again. I've been a innovation and startup junkie for a very, very long time. Born into it. My dad was a horribly curious person, getting himself into all kinds of trouble and various business ideas and snags. So I definitely have that DNA. I love I haven't met a dumpster fire I don't like, because I can get in there and cool things down. But really, at the heart of it is then the people. So I start with operations, and you and your organization, you're at people first, right? But they really go hand in hand. And so I get in there and I start seeing where process is all funky and try to get these people all swimming in the right lane.
That's awesome. I can imagine with a story like that in a background that you've got stories to tell. But if I could target, let me ask you this. There's been a lot of talk lately in the circles I move in, all startup circles, of course, about burnout. It seems to be that work-life balance is something of a swear word these days.
Yeah.
And it's always a question for me. So as a startup founder, you want to make it to the 7% that make it. But on the other hand, you'd like to be alive to see that happen. So there's that balance constantly between building a highly performing startup and burning yourself to ash in the first year. So how do you navigate that?
Well, yeah. So, when folks are coming to me, they're usually in that state, where, in restaurant land, I come from hospitality. Chefs say, messy station, messy mind. You look at a chef and he's got like his ingredients everywhere and things on fire. Like you're actually looking at that person's brain and how it's operating. We've all seen people who are in crisis and they're calm and everything's orderly. That's because their brain is calm and orderly, and these folks that are just kind of all over the place, they are approaching or already through that burnout phase, because burnout is, to me, an operations problem.
Yes.
And we can't scale ourselves as much as us startup people or ops people think we can. And, burnout isn't scalable. So we just got to get past that. We got to rethink, realign, and lean in on those that are there to help us. Because sometimes we're in it so deep, we just need a helping hand.
Yeah, burnout isn't scalable, but it is catchy. And
it does catch.
And I think it does for something that you alluded to in what you said. And that's that as a startup. And again, I've a multiple startup founder, exited one time so far. It starts out as a little bit of a cult of personality where all of that founding team does a little bit of everything. But the founder's job is to be the lodestone that everybody's pulled towards. And what I've seen happen very often is they don't understand how to appropriately or effectively delegate. So they wind up, as they grow, continuing to try to do everything, which not only obviously causes burnout, but it also retards the growth of everybody underneath them. So I think that's a part of the equation, at least from what I've seen.
Well, yeah, and what they do, inserting themselves all the time everywhere and not empowering their teams to make mistakes or to learn or even figuring out like when to delegate or who to delegate to, or hiring those resources so that you can delegate. All that is just a part of like creating chaos and not bringing order. And chaos isn't scalable. You're just accelerating collapse at that point. It's true. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, people in their lanes and people responding intelligently and being eager to help out and join and solve a problem. That's just the result of good organization and good operations.
I completely
and of course,
agree.
There's a big person component there too.
Yeah, and the person part for me, So I teach the EFG leadership framework, engage, fulfill, and grow. And one of the things from a leadership perspective slash personnel perspective where I see burnout manifest is the fact a lack of ENF. So the team isn't fully engaged, so they don't fully understand or aren't bought in to what's going
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens very often in a team that, again, this is what I've seen, just my own limited experience. But what I've seen is that that team, they're working harder than they'd like to for something they don't fully understand, and they don't feel like they're making progress.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that same exact group of people, if they understood the direction they're running in and they felt a sense of progress, they would go home just as tired, but they'd be tired and satisfied instead of tired and frustrated. And again, in my experience, it's that tired and frustrated that sprints you down burnout lane.
Yeah, and as a leader, to see that in others and address it means that you have to have that high emotional intelligence in
Yes,
order to respond. And if you're not taking care of yourself in the same way, you're not able to lift your head up, look left and right, and see who needs help, or even project that kind of confidence, or follow me, or hey, let's reprioritize that, or take care of yourself. Go home early today, but I still need the project done tomorrow. Stuff like that. Simple things.
yeah, I used to, early in my consulting career, this is going back about a decade, I had a client. I'm an early to work person. That's my nature, especially, and this is back in the days of everybody was in office, especially if there's a long drive. Because I've always felt that if I choose to take an engagement that's a long drive, it's incumbent on me to make it there on time. And
Mm-hmm.
and I can't control traffic, but I can control when I walk out my door. So I typically got to work very early. So I was usually the first or second person there. I'm sometimes sat in my car waiting for somebody to open up for me. That person was almost always the CEO. He, like me, believed in getting there early. So he had a talk with his team one day, and he said, look, I don't care when you guys work. I don't care when you come. I don't care where you go. I only care that you're achieving the outcomes that you want. That's all, or that we've agreed to, rather. That's all that I
Mm-hmm.
care about. So if you get here at 10 and stay till 7, if you get here at 7 and leave at noon, I don't care as long as the work is being done. That's the message he gave. But what he would do is he'd be one of the first people there. He would set up in the lobby. And when people would come in, he would personally greet them, look down, and write something in his notebook.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, so
There's
I
some
pulled him
disconnect.
aside after a couple of weeks. I'm like, you understand that the message you're saying and the message you're showing are 100% incompatible, right? You get that, right? And he tried to play innocent with me, like, oh, what do you mean? I'm like, come on.
That's
So,
hilarious.
yeah,
Yeah.
I say this to say in reference to burnout, and you hit it earlier. The founder and the leaders need to model the behavior they're looking for.
Well, there's that, and then as you have mentioned a couple times, setting the right expectation
Mhm.
is so key. If we're not doing it right, we're just creating anxiety, and that is going to contribute to people just like really being like so hard on themselves because they don't know what you want,
Yes,
and a lot of folks really aren't comfortable advocating for themselves. So that's why things like open door policies are a cop out. It doesn't take much just to pay attention to someone and ask them how they're doing and what you can do to help.
exactly. And it's so funny. Set the expectation and manage the expectation. That's consulting 101. I don't care if you're a software developer, a leadership consultant, or what you are. Set the expectation and manage it. And yet, you couldn't be more right. It's something I just don't see enough of. And I want to
Mm-hmm.
push one step further and say, most especially with people early in their career. I know we're not supposed to talk about age, but I want you to envision the world from a 24-year-old a year out of college, some 50-year-old person whose title is founder slash CEO, who
Right.
your boss's boss reports to. That's intimidating as heck for that person. Often, I know I'm generalizing, to walk into that open door and say, I have a problem that I've seen.
Yeah,
That's hard.
you- you're right. And this next generation. One of the things I do to give back is I teach at a local university, and I teach business 101. So super young folks. These are first year students. This is going to be the first generation that are going to be managing 5 generations at once.
Wow.
And these kids, the kids, they need to have these emotional intelligence skills, these soft skills, to be able to even recognize what's going on in each one of these different generations and how they're showing up. The level of complexity that adds to trying to lead a team fresh out of school, that's I can't even imagine what that's going to be like. you know?
Well, if our economy was such that boomers were able to retire, maybe it would be less of a problem.
Right. Yeah,
But,
my poor mom who's almost 80,
yeah,
like still driving Uber.
yeah, I say that to folks all the time as well. My dad is in his late 70s and works a very physical job, still full time. And I could have retired him a couple times over. He's just sits in his DNA. He's a hard worker. And
Mm-hmm.
people ask me, Jerry, why haven't you retired? I'm like, gosh, if I retired, my dad would disown me. I sit on my butt behind a desk. I'm only in my mid 50s. He would disown me.
Mm-hmm.
But in all seriousness, back to our topic about burnout. Another thing you mentioned in the beginning is organization. So I oversimplify that to effectively delegating. But what other organizational tools or do you recommend to ensure that burnout doesn't happen and you still have a highly performing team?
Well, that's about maximizing folks' bandwidth. And again, to your point, you have to know when to hire. You have to know when to delegate. Um, if we're not organizationally, operationally thinking about those two things together, we're not being able to scale or hyperscale if we need. We probably do this. You and I do this just secondhand. As far as like, okay, this is my outcome that I want. That means at this point, if I'm successful doing this, I'm going to need to hire another 10 headcount. In order to do that effectively, I need to start the search this, and I need to call Jerry and get him on the phone because I'm going to need these positions. We do this automatically. But folks need to get this out on the whiteboard. They need to get it out in the Miro. They need to get it on a piece of paper. Like what's going to get you here? What's going to get you there? Because what got you here, of course, isn't going to get you there, et cetera. And who do you need to do that with? In a way that you're not stretching everyone so thin that you're breaking people and churning through them. Because I really like building sustainable systems.
Yes.
Systems meaning people too. And it starts with wanting to do that and recognizing that it's best for the organization and for all the people, including your customers. So,
yeah, there's several things to unpack in what you said there, Corey. I recommend a book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. It's an older book, but it really covers that well. The company that you run at 5 million is going to be wildly different in structure than the company running at 50. The entire organization will be different. One of the things I push back with COOs on, at risk of starting a fight, is in the beginning, you always need structure and organization. Let me lead there. But in the beginning, in my opinion, that should be a very light touch, almost more of a framework than a structure. And the reason I feel that way is that an early stage startup's biggest strength is being nimble and fast. And as it continues to engage with its customers and learns more and more about what works and what doesn't, that light framework slowly gets filled in with more detailed process. So I'm all about in the very beginning, when you're 3 dudes, 1 pizza, and a table in a basement, you don't need a formal org chart and an enormous amount of structure.
Titles are a disservice in that case.
100%. And overly structured organization out of that as well. Again, in my opinion, because you don't yet know what really your customers love about you. For all you know, you're 3 pivots away from the right answer. I mean, how many times, Corey, have we seen startups that started off as one thing and become successful as something wildly different?
Yeah, plenty of success stories there, and definitely all worth learning from, so that you hopefully don't have to reinvent the wheel every damn time. I've seen so many founders just go through that same process over and over and over, and they just haven't given over to the fact that it doesn't have to be so hard. And I think that there's another part about burnout there, is that people think that if they aren't feeling these feels, that they're not being successful, they're not working hard enough. And it doesn't have to be that hard. We do have to we have to give ourselves some more grace and understand that it's okay to expect to be able to enjoy half of your day, or at least a third of it.
Yeah, I'll circle back to something you said earlier. It's about knowing what success looks like, even internally.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We talk often, and we just did talk about making sure your team knows what success looks like. Do you know what success looks like?
Yeah, and your customers are going to tell you, and chances are a lot of your team members have a good idea too. And if you ask them, it unfortunately is probably different than what you're
Yeah,
thinking. The further you get removed from the customer, like that gets more dangerous, every step of the way.
yeah. I'll tell you. Even the brief amount of talk that we've had the chance to have today, I've got to say, I bet you'd have a lot to share with new business leaders across a broad number of topics. If you could give just one piece of advice to any new business leader or founder, what do you think it would be, Corey?
Yeah, Jerry, especially around what we're talking about, because it is topical and on a lot of people's minds. You know, uh, it's important to build systems not just for business, but like we were talking about, like for ourselves too.
Mm-hmm.
We spend so much time optimizing our teams and our funnels, our products, but we neglect our own capacity. And the truth there is that our companies can't really grow faster than we can. And I've seen it again and again. Burnout isn't a fluke. It's a serious business risk, and
Yes.
that's why we are working so hard in recognizing it in others. But then again, we forget to do that for ourselves. The other thing would be to lean in on that emotional intelligence aspect, these soft skills. There's survey after survey right now that say CEOs, the number one thing they're hiring for is soft skills. Have they looked in the mirror? Are they exhibiting those skills? So that's what I got for you.
No, I couldn't agree more. You know, there's an old saying, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin. If it wasn't him, it was Mark Twain. It's always one of those two guys.
Love
But
Mark Twain.
yeah, he said that fish rot from the head down, and organizations do as well. And I just completely massacred that, but that's the essence of it. And in all the engagements I've done, it's almost always, and by almost I mean 99% of the time, a leadership problem. And that sounds a little bit daunting on the one hand, but on the other hand, that means that you as the leader have the power to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
To quote Glenda the Good Witch, the answer's been in your hands the whole time. So, or that instance on her feet. But that's so key. No organization grows past its leadership. So if you're not growing as a leader, you're going to find your plateau, and that's where you're going to park your company.
Yep, exactly right. And your team's going to let you.
Yeah.
So this has been a lot of fun, Jerry.
Yeah. Awesome. No, I appreciate it. It's been great. One more question, because I kind of want to put it all together. So as it relates to burnout, we've talked about delegation. We've talked about structure. We've talked about looking at what success looks like. We talked about making sure that we set and manage expectations. But bringing it home, you said something that I want to just touch on, and we can wrap up after that if you'd like. But when you're looking to start a startup, it's not a 9-to-5 job. That is what it is. No startup in the world I've ever heard of ever has been a 9-to-5, 5-day-a-week job. If you're seeking that, probably you should get a job.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in an insulting way. That's probably where you're better served. So what have you seen that helps people go from there to the realization that sometimes they will have crazy weeks where they put in 1,000,000 hours? How do you help people, or what do you see as far as people creating a realistic understanding of what their life will be for the next 5 to 10 years as a startup founder?
Yeah, if they're not already feeling it, then it's about just acquiescing to the understanding that is maybe what some periods of life are going to be like, and then also getting them ready and preparing for what success does look like as far as, say, other stakeholders like investors. Because as you mentioned earlier, there are these points where your business shifts, and you're going to have to go back into startup mode. And startup mode meaning like, I haven't been here before. I have to build it from scratch again, and it might be at 3 million a year. It might be 5 million a year. It might be when you hit 100 employees. It might be when you hit 1,000 employees. It might be when you need to duplicate and expand in another country with a different culture. Then all of a sudden you're back in the trenches. So there's this beautiful ebb and flow. I call it beautiful.
Mhm.
I like the moments when I'm coasting and sailing and I feel like, things are all really great. And I also love it when I see that wave come in and I'm like, okay, all right, get ready. But understanding that it's coming really helps me manage it when I'm in it.
I love that.
And I'm able to help people get that view and also help them prepare. And the first and second time founders don't necessarily get that that's a cycle. We spend so much of our lives being taught that things are linear. Nothing about this damn thing is linear.
No, not
It's
even a little.
cyclical.
I tell people all the time, there's nothing higher than an entrepreneur's high and nothing lower than an entrepreneur's low. And if
That's
you're
in the
lucky,
same afternoon.
yeah, I was going to say, I was just going to say, if you're lucky, you'll only experience that 4 times in a day.
Right. Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Yeah, no, the only thing I'd add to what you said, because I think it was darn near perfect, the only thing I'd add is you need to learn to accept that your schedule is going to be a little bit out of your control in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes you're going to have to put in that 7-day week. The part where you've got to remind yourself, though, is to take some of that back. When
Mm-hmm.
there is a little bit of a lull, take some of that back, recharge, and then come back at the problem. If
And
you
be
let
okay with the fact that there's a lull. Like if there's a lull, be like, okay, all right, sit in it, marinate in it, like don't pick up your phone.
Yeah, exactly. If on a scale of 1 to 10, you let every problem become a 10, first of all, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And second of all of the problems are a 10, then none of them are really a 10. You're
Mm-hmm.
you're being probably because of your nerves dramatic. But yeah, so first of all, thank you again for being on the show. This has been wonderful. If folks want to reach you, where's the best place for them to reach you, Corey?
A good spot is my website, and that's going to be CoreyTheHart.com, CoreyTheHart, CoreyTheHart.com. And then there's also, that's my handle on everything, Corey the Hart. So find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever you need to. I'm like
Awesome.
the A-team.
Awesome. Well, that will be in the show notes. So anybody out listening to us while they drive, please don't crash your car trying to write that out. Just check the show notes when you get home. If you, like me, forget to put the dot in there, you will get a musician's website named Corey Hart. That will not be helpful. And while it might be entertaining, not going to get you where you need to be. So it's CoreyTheHart.com. Thanks again for being on the show, Corey. You're welcome back anytime. It was great.
All right, Sherry. Appreciate you.
Thanks.